Hello everyone, welcome to yet another Buddy webinar. Today we are going to dive into the world of headless WordPress, and together with Fran Agulto we will try to create a kind of simple WordPress and Next.js application together with a bit of GraphQL. So Fran, because you are much more of an expert when it comes to Jamstack, to headless and everything, tell us a few words about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely, Magic. I'm super stoked to be here. And my kind of battle cry, if you will, is I'm jam stoked to be here. Extra excited. Thank you, Magic, for having me. So a little bit about myself, just to know where your information is coming from. I'm a DevRel advocate at WP Engine focused on headless WordPress. I started my career actually in tech at WP Engine on the sales side of things. And I was telling Magic offline when we first met, I was like, the inner nerd hit me. And during COVID, one of the few things, I mean, there's mostly negative with COVID, but one of the positive things is when we worked from home, I had so much time to learn. And I was like, you know what? I saw a demo that our old developer relations manager, Matt Landers, did on headless WordPress. And I'm like, you know what? I said to myself, I need to learn that. I enrolled in a JavaScript bootcamp focused on React and the MERN stack, and the rest is history. Now I'm here 2.5 years later and still breaking React code. So
yes, and now we are here. So this is one of the great things about COVID. We had more time to learn really cool and amazing things. So one of the few things we can say that COVID was cool about.
Yeah.
I am Maciek Palmowski. I work here at Buddy as a WordPress ambassador. So and good news, we have Mwale with us, and he's saying hi to us. So hi, Mwale.
Howdy.
So today we'll learn about how to decouple WordPress and what does it mean. What is this headless WordPress? We will learn how to create this simple Next.js app using WordPress, GraphQL, and of course Next. And in the end, we'll try to deploy everything using Buddy on a Netlify account. Also, if you like what we are doing, remember to press the subscribe button on YouTube. You will always get informed about all the upcoming webinars, and also you will have a chance to watch really a lot of interesting stuff that we have on our channel. And the last thing, if you have any questions regarding headless WordPress, don't hesitate to ask them in the comment section, either on YouTube or LinkedIn or whatever you are watching this. Okay, so I think everything I remembered about everything. Yes, so we can start talking about headless WordPress. So let's start with the basic question. What does it mean? What does it mean, headless?
Yeah, that's a good start to the webinar to ask that basic question. So headless WordPress, essentially in a few words, Magic, is the decoupled approach of cutting off the front-end presentation layer that PHP usually handles in a monolithic sense with traditional WordPress, and allowing a front-end JavaScript framework within the Node ecosystem to handle the front-end UI layer, and then making WordPress basically just a database with an endpoint that you're going to consume that data out of. So essentially, that's what it is. It's cutting hence the word headless. It's not because the Sleepy Hollow and Headless Horseman story that we knew when we were kids during Halloween. No, it's not that. Also, although it kind of relates to that when people think, "Oh, Fran, what is headless WordPress? Does it have to do with a headless horseman?" No, you're literally cutting off the head of WordPress and making it having the JavaScript front end do the work on the front end UI. So that's what it is. Now, the first thing I wanted to just tell you, Magic, did you have another question real quick, or can I dive right into
a quick question? Yeah. Why should we decouple WordPress?
Yes, that's actually a next that's a great question. So why should you decouple WordPress? Well, there's actually there's three main reasons that you would. Okay, when you sit down as a developer, and this is something that you and I being in tech, Magic, especially web development, at the end of the day, typically if you work for an agency or you're a mom and pop that has your own business that relies on your digital property, aka your website or your web application, in order to generate money at the bottom line, you're going to have to make a decision on, like, hey, now that it's available, headless or traditional. Now here's the whys. Okay, if you want an uptick of perceived performance and actual performance as far as the Jamstack is concerned, because I throw that word out there, and I will, for those that aren't familiar, because there might be some kind of super new beginners to the crowd of headless WordPress, Jamstack stands for JavaScript API and Markup, and essentially that methodology means that at build time, meaning not at runtime, because traditional WordPress is server-side rendered, right? It's dynamic. So when you hit that URL, every request is going to go back to the server. PHP runs everything, creates the files and all the things that you requested per that template, sends back it into HTML form, and then there, voila, you can read it on the browser. In the decoupled approach, in this sense, from a performance uptick wise, you're not only cutting the front end off, that JavaScript framework, you're going to pre-build or pre-render everything, meaning you're going to build everything before a user requests it, okay? And then you're going to throw it on a CDN, which means static files, which then in turn means quick access when you hit that endpoint. Literally, there is no going back to a server. All the files are right there already. So that's one thing, Magic, is that, like, literally the performance uptick can be quite noticeable, perceived by the user, and also within the tech stack. So that's number one. Number two, from a security perspective, when you decouple your WordPress site, the surface area of attack for hackers is very small. That's number one. Number two, because your backend is hidden, and this is with any decoupled approach, you could have a Shopify backend, you could have a Drupal backend, you could have a MongoDB backend, whatever. Contentful, you get the idea. It's hidden. It's hidden. So they won't even know you're using WordPress in this case. So the surface area of attack is more secure. And then there's only so much nefariousness you could really do in a browser. And then the third and last thing, and for me, Magic, I think this is the most important, because yes, you could aggressively cache pages in traditional WordPress, speed, all that stuff, right? Depending on how dynamic the site is, yada, yada, yada. However, from a future-proof perspective, I truly believe, and this is why I joined the DevRel team here, focused on headless WordPress, the future of the web, as far as web technology is concerned, is decoupled movement. It's cutting the front end layer off and having third and back end party services with all that data on your back end consumed by endpoints, so that you could essentially future proof your front end UI, right? That way, when users are trying to access your application or website through different nodes, a kiosk, a phone, it's much easier. It's much easier to grab any front-end library or framework and whatnot and manipulate that data from your back-end API into what you want your users to see. So those are the three main things that I think a business or an agency would decouple. Now, Magic, let me just add something on the flip side. On the flip side, why wouldn't you? Overkill. Because I'm telling you, traditional WordPress is just fine for small, medium businesses that don't have that many users, or my sister, who has a therapy practice in California. she uses traditional WordPress. She does not want to touch code. And WordPress is excellent for that. She can just download a bunch of plugins, manipulate her front end, and not even ask a developer to do anything. You know what I mean?
Yeah, this is the great thing that about WordPress, that it can be really almost no code or low code. And the moment we are trying to go headless, we require this one extra layer of work. We have to prepare this front end. And there was a thing, because together with Fran, we had that dry run, which turned into quite an interesting discussion. And we also discussed that that headless is a really great solution when it comes to the moment when you are, for example, let's say a React developer. You don't want to learn PHP. So in this moment, why learn PHP? It's easier just to grab, for example, Gatsby or something similar, and using your knowledge that you already have, just grab the data from WordPress, mix it together, and you will have a working website without the need of learning new technology, which is sometimes, especially right now, very important, because we don't have too much time, and learning new tech takes time. So
yes, 100% agreed, Magic. It does take a lot of time, and that's the thing too. From a financial perspective, the decision going headless, you have to account for money, because as to your point, Magic, you're going to have to hire, if you don't know React code, say you're not even savvy too much on JavaScript, you're going to have to hire a React JavaScript. You're going to have to hire a developer team. And that costs money unless you want to learn it yourself. Now, again, there's trade-offs to everything. That's why, like, I truly believe that, like, there's always going to be the room for both monolithic and headless WordPress. And I think that's the beauty, that you have a choice in web development, especially with WordPress.
Yeah, that's true. So I think it's time to show how to convert, how to decouple WordPress, right?
Yeah, let's do it, Magic. Let's talk through this. So the first thing that you have to consider when you're decoupling WordPress is the API layer, right? Because as mentioned, when you go the Jamstack approach, the decoupled approach, API-driven development, whatever you want to call it, it's just that. It's your API endpoint that you're going to consume this data off of. And luckily, there's two ways you can do this in WordPress. I'm going to use GraphQL. And don't worry, everybody in the webinar, throughout this whole webinar that I'm going through, in our developers.wpengine.com website, we have a whole tutorial that I'm playing off of, as well as REST versus GraphQL and all these things. So if you want to dive deeper in it and whatnot, I'll work with Magic to send some links post webinar. But anyway, there's two ways you can do this. You can use the REST API, which some of you that are already developing in traditional WordPress already use, because it ships with WordPress core. And with the REST API, you use the HTTP verbs, or I like to call them verbs, but methods like get, create, read, update, delete, to grab that data off it. And then I always pull up this handbook here from WordPress.org so I have a reference of like all the endpoints that I have, so that I can grab that data from post, categories, tags, etc. Now, here's the difference, and there's trade-offs, which we won't go deep dive, because this is not a REST versus GraphQL webinar, but major difference between, well, actually the two major difference I want to address, Magic, is the way you grab data. So first of all, as I mentioned, HTTP method, REST API. GraphQL, queries and mutations. Because what GraphQL is at its core is a query language. And when you have a GraphQL layer on whatever database data schema you're using, it exposes it as a GraphQL schema. This way, how it's interesting, because one of the benefits of it is that GraphQL itself kind of makes each API is kind of different, right? Whether you're using a Shopify API, WordPress core REST API, whatever backend you might be, it's hard as a developer because you're like, oh, great. Now I have to like expose that schema and see how the API endpoints are all laid out and everything. With GraphQL, it uniforms it and turns everything into a GraphQL schema. And most, I'll show you real quick, most GraphQL installs now within a database have this graphical IDE editor where you have a query composer, and this is my WordPress schema here, exposed in a GraphQL scheme. So that's the beauty of GraphQL. It kind of unsnowflakes each API, because an API to me is like a snowflake magic. It's all different, unique. And GraphQL will just unsnowflake that, and now you're like kind of used to this graphical IDE. And then the other thing I wanted to point out is that you guys can reference that in WordPress.org, all the endpoints within WordPress that you have access to in REST. But in GraphQL, it is just one endpoint. And within that endpoint, in REST, you're at the mercy of what's in the API. You can't declare exactly what you want. But as I mentioned here, in GraphQL, in this case, again, queries and mutations, I'm querying and asking my GraphQL server, which is on top of WordPress now, hey, GraphQL, for my WordPress data schema, I want all the posts. And within those posts have nodes. And those nodes have fields of title, URI, I'm pulling out the date, the content. You can pull out other things, but for the webinar's sake, we're just going to run this, press play against the GraphQL server. And there you go. I asked exactly for this data and in this form, and it's giving it back to me in this form, JSON. So simple as that. That's how we decouple WordPress with GraphQL. Now, skipping one thing in the plugins, and I got to give a shout out, Magic. I know you know who I'm going to shout out to. One of my favorite people in the decoupled movement in WordPress, Mr. Jason Ball.
Of air fried pizza, yeah.
Air fried. In fact, I think I'm doing an injustice to Jason because I should have had like an air fried pizza ready for lunch here. But anyway, brought to you by Air Fried Pizza and Jason Ball. So WP GraphQL is an open source plugin created by Jason Ball, who works at WP Engine, and he's one of my favorite people in the world. But essentially, all you do is download this plugin, and then it turns your WordPress install, like I said, into a GraphQL server. And then all of a sudden, you have a GraphQL option in the menu on the left side of WordPress core. And then you have your graphical IDE. So that's it. That's all you have to do to decouple WordPress. Now, Magic, we're ready to talk about the front end. In this case, we're going to use Next.js for our front end framework. And then for some helper functionality to grab the data on the front end, we're going to use the Apollo client and its GraphQL library. So let's jump over to my Visual Studio Code here. And I have some things already pre-made for the sake of time here. And again, don't worry, we have an step-by-step tutorial on the website that I'll link over after the webinar is over. So the first thing I want to talk about is Next.js itself, right? Because last time I checked, which was like last week, and I always see Lee Robinson, who's the head of developer relations at Vercel. Next.js is made by Vercel, and it's the most popular, most used, downloaded framework in this ecosystem, and there's a reason for that. And for me, developers are full of opinions, and whether you agree with them or not, that's just how they are, Magic. You know that. You've been doing this for longer.
Of course.
You know what I'm saying, man? So I'm going to share with you guys my opinion about why I think Next.js is so popular. So the first thing is the developer experience and the productivity of the developer flow that it allows you to get into off the bat as a developer, okay? Because the first thing is how it's structured boilerplate wise when you spin up and pull its npm package out of the box. So if I jump into my terminal right now, which I did before this, and then put the utility command in there, npx create next app, it's going to pull out all the dependencies and the packages and all that. And this is basically a Next.js boilerplate. I've made some things, but I'm going to go over what it spins up out of the box here. The first thing I think is super sweet is the page-based routing that it does out of the box, because as a web developer, especially on websites, Next.js is actually built architecturally already for you for pages and routes. And as a web developer, you're like, oh, great, sweet. My framework that I'm using already does that for me. So in this pages directory, all you do is, in this case, the index.js comes out of the box with it. That's the home page. When you hit just the /, that's the default home page route. But I can drop in this page, and it relates to the file. The route is related to the file name. So if I put like about.js magic in this, and then render create a React component, a default component, and render some JSX like hello world or whatever. If I go to my the browser and then visit that path /about, it's right there for you. So that's one of the things that I think is pretty sweet. And then obviously this is built on top of React, so it uses React's component style library. And then the second thing that I think is super sweet about Next.js, and I'll get down into this once I start talking about the files and how to create a headless WordPress site here, is the rendering patterns that Next.js allows you to have as a developer at a page level, right? Because I mentioned at the beginning that like going decoupled and Jamstacking your site is the approach of, hey, as much as we can at build time, before a user even is available to request and hit that URL at build time, let's build everything. Let's build everything. Let's make it static. Let's throw it on a CDN, faster access. Some people in countries that maybe the internet's not so good, static file, they can access it. Okay, great. However, with pre-rendering, if you will, pre-building, there's a trade-off. Long build times. Because if your site is ginormous and you're building everything from scratch every time you make a change, that's a trade-off. You're gonna have long build times.
And every new page will make it longer and longer and longer.
Longer and longer. Yes, Magic. Exactly. It's like rebuilding your house every dang time you make a. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah. I decided to clean the window. Let's change let's rebuild the fundamentals.
Let's rebuild the concrete.
Exactly.
You know what I mean, man?
And this is extra annoying when you have, for example, a news site that has news from like 10 years backwards, and you just published a new post. And if you would pre-build everything, yes, all the news from those 10 years back will be rebuilt. So this is a trade-off, as you mentioned.
100% a trade-off. Now, here's how Next.js kind of alleviates that as well. On a per-page basis, you have the optionality to either statically generate or pre-build, if you will, each page, or you could go back to, and again, Magic and I were joking around, because if you're on the Twitter space in web development and other social media platforms, there's this joke going around that like web development is like fashion. In the 70s, bell bottoms were in disco. You know what I'm saying? Like, guess what, Magic? Bell bottoms are making a comeback. Retro music are making, and then like server-side rendering could be making a comeback. But in Next.js, you can choose per page to server-side render instead of statically generating, so that your entire site's not pre-building, if you will. And then there's a hybrid pattern of like incremental static regeneration, where you can set a time interval where the page, say a certain page is changes quite a bit, but you not enough to like, hey, I'm going to statically pre-build this page first. But in Next.js, I can set a revalidate cache interval where it's going to check my backend, in this case, WordPress, say you set it every 30 minutes, whatever the time interval is going to check to see if there was any changes within the data. And then it's going to invalidate that on a timed interval. So the first user that hits it will get the stale data. Then that triggers it to go, okay, yeah. And then now we're going to show upon every subsequent request the new data. So, that's what I think is sweet. Okay. So I think now we are ready to get into the nitty-gritty and just go over how I did this thing. So let's do it. So the first step in creating a headless WordPress site is, as I said, we're connecting. We're going to use the Apollo client, and you can download the package. I've already installed the Apollo client dependency and its GraphQL client, so we can use its data fetching library. So we need to hook Apollo client to WordPress. So the first thing that we have to do is use environment variables. And how we're going to do this is we're going to create a .env.local file, which I already have right here in the root of my project. And within this environment file, you're going to have a key, which you can name whatever you want. In this case, I named it Next Public WordPress API URL. And then you simply put your value in of your WordPress API URL, exactly what the key is asking you for. So that's the first thing. So then what happens now is that within Next.js by default, it's going to look for the .env.local file in the root of this project to load any environment variable files within a process.env object, which I'll show you in a second how that's created. So that's step one. The next step is the Apollo client. So we have to, now that we've downloaded the dependency of the Apollo client, we just have to create that instance of Apollo. So let's see how I did this here in this file. So what I did is I jumped into the root of my directory. I created a folder called library, or lib for short. And within this library, I have an apollo.js file. And then let's see what the configuration is. So the first line up at the top on line 1, I'm importing the Apollo client and its in-memory cache from the package. Okay, and then below, I'm creating a new instance right here of the Apollo client, and I'm just calling the variable client. And then within this, we have a config object with two properties. Magic is a URI property that's going to point our environment variable to that GraphQL endpoint, because that's where Apollo is going to say, hey, Fran and Magic, where is your WordPress data? Where do you want me to grab it? It's right here. So that's what I was talking about with the process.env object that Next.js will look for as far as from the Apollo side is concerned. And then one of the reasons to use a client-side library to help is having in-memory cache on Apollo, which is one of the main reasons people and web developers use Apollo client, so that when you make a query, a GraphQL query, and a same one is made, it caches and stores in Apollo's memory. That way there's some performance upticks there. Okay, so that's it. Within a couple of 4 or 5 lines of code here, we've configured an Apollo instance and we've connected WordPress to our Next.js application. Now we need to access this and then grab that data dynamically from WordPress within our pages. So let's do it. Okay, so the next thing you have to do is within the pages directory, in order to make your Apollo client and its provider accessed throughout the root of the Next.js application and all its components and its pages, is Next.js ships out of the box. I just call it a wrapper. It's the _app.js file. And within this file is where all the page props within the page components are accessible within Next.js. And in here, as you can see, I'm importing the Apollo provider from its library client and then its React instance. And then I'm taking our client that we just made from our library Apollo folder here. And then I'm wrapping it around the Apollo provider component and passing in the client as a property, so that now, voila, we now have access to our Apollo provider across our entire Next.js application. And okay, step 2 is done. Now here's the fun part, y'all. And this is where I get really excited. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about how making the home page in, and don't worry, I'm talking about code I know is abstract. You know that too, Magic, but I'll hit the browser once or twice just to show you what's going on and seeing that sweet JSX and HTML. But the first thing we need to do in our home page, because this is what I actually want to do here, is I want a list of titles on a home page. And then within that within those titles, I want a clickable link so that a user can click on that post title and go, I want to be taken to the details of this post. Give me the post details page. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do on the home page, and it's funny because I think of this in a basketball analogy. I know a lot of developers maybe have like little quirks on how they think of things, but for me, this is how I think of this. It's like, so it's like when you're doing a basketball shot, like you're like taking the basketball from down here, and then you're shooting it so that the ball goes up and into the basket. And in this case, my hand is my functions, and then the ball is data, and the ball is jumping into the hoop to give the data into the JSX and HTML. Corny, I know, but it's how I like to remember things. So it starts off with the first function here that you guys can see on the screen. Magic, you can see clear, yes? Right here on line 32?
Yes, of course. Everything is visible.
Okay, perfecto. So the first thing that I mentioned at the top is that with Next.js, you have the option of essentially statically generating all your pages, pre-rendering, pre-building. Within Next.js, the function name to do this is export. It's going to be an asynchronous function, get static props. Okay, that tells Next.js, in this case, I'm telling it, hey, for the index page, I want this to be statically generated every time. And that's okay, because the data here won't change much. Plus our query is stagnant. It's not dynamic. There's no variable. It's the same query that we made actually from the GraphQL IDE in WordPress. So that's the next step that I wanted to talk about, is that within our asynchronous get static props function, we're going to create a variable. I just named it get post, which is going to equal our GraphQL client. And that's when you would go back and remember our query here. Y'all remember that? Yep. We're going to go back. We're going to take that query and essentially paste this within a template literal backticks into this variable here of getting the post, so that we're telling Next.js within this function, Next.js, this is my GraphQL query, and this is exactly what I want to grab. Now, after that, we're going to have to make a call with a client and pass in the query string to the config object right here, because like I said, I called it get post. And then here's the query property here, and we're just grabbing that. Then we have to traverse that data to pull out the data we want into the home page. So Here's the other variable of post, and then the response is going to be data post nodes. You're probably asking, Fran, how do you memorize, or how do you know that? I don't memorize these things. Are you kidding me? Coding is hard enough. Developers always look at docs and code. You know what I'm saying? So just so that I remember, oh, how does it return again? I go back to my graphical IDE, and there it is, how it comes back within the GraphQL scheme of WordPress: data post nodes. And that's how you manipulate the response and get it back. And then you have a return object, of course, with a props property, and then you're returning all the post data. Okay, we're set with our function. This is grabbing our data. Now we have to shoot that data up into an export default function that's going to act as our page component. Okay, and this is where it's going to return the JSX, which will show the HTML on the page. So in this case right here, within this function magic, I'm putting within the object parameter post, because that's the data that we want accessible within this function. And then I'm just returning some HTML with some JSX right here, mapping through, dynamically mapping through all the post data, and then returning a single post. And then within this return statement, you're going to notice something, y'all, here. And this is one of the cool things of React development, is component reusability. So I created a postcard component because, remember, I told y'all that the idea here, and you'll see in a second because I'm going to spin up the browser, is we want a clickable link with the post title, right? Well, you know, we want to make that pretty and reusable because we might have another page that might need like a postcard and whatnot. So I made a components folder with a postcard.js file. And within this, just an export default function with the postcard. And then we've got the post within the parameter object, we got the post data in here. And then we're pulling back the, essentially, we're just grabbing the post.title within using next link. And that's another sweet thing about Next.js. It has the link component with client-side transitions for linking between pages out of the box. So that's cool. So let's see how that looks on the browser, shall we? So if I just run my development server, and it kind of always defaults to localhost 3000. Let's visit the browser here. And there it is. And before I actually, here's the postcard component. And then this is the dynamic data that we're grabbing right here. This isn't from the Next.js front end. These titles are coming from here. Okay. So the next thing we're going to want to do is, when I click this link, I want a dynamic route page to route me to the actual detail of, and I know everybody's dying magic to know what my top 5 movies of all time are.
I know already.
You know already, and you had some disagreements, and that's okay. But lastly, we need, and then I'm super excited for the next step because I want to see how we're going to deploy this to Buddy. But lastly, what we need to do, like I said, is homepage not dynamic, right? It's always the same query and whatnot, but we need a dynamic route. Okay, so every time a user, Next.js doesn't know when they click on the link what that user is going to click and what route and path to access and what content detail that post relates to. In Next.js, the naming convention, y'all, to create a dynamic route file is the bracket syntax. So in this case, I created a dynamic route file, and the parameter within this dynamic route, you could do URI. I do slug. It's just the easiest, just the slug of each post. But just like that, this tells Next.js, hey, this route's dynamic. So we're not we are not super sure what the user is going to access here slug-wise, but it will be a parameter of slug. And then when they click on that detailed page to that slug, we're going to give them back the post detail content. So let's see how that's done. You're going to notice a little bit of similarity here, y'all. Because, again, you guys saw this on the index page, right? Get static props. We want to essentially Jamstack this thing and grab the data pre-rendering from WordPress and then pump it into our HTML JSX up on our default function. Now, here's the thing, right? Notice a couple of differences. Remember I said this is a post detail page. We don't want all posts. We don't want that. That's what we're grabbing on the index file, index.js file on the homepage. We're grabbing all the posts because that's never going to change. We just want all the titles. This is the detail page. So if you notice the query changed a little bit, y'all, and you can paste this into graphical IDE and it'll come back. But notice here is that it's singular. And then to parameterize, if you will, this query so that it knows, hey, this query has variety. It's a variable, okay? Like it's not static like the index file. Fran's asking for actual details to a post with the ID type, which is the slug, and the database ID, meaning that, hey, these are the things that are going to be changing within this query, within this GraphQL query. So that tells Next.js, hey, yeah, within GraphQL, this query is a variable and it's going to relate within this parameter, within the object here, you pass in the params, which is the slug, and it's going to say, hey, these are the, it's going to look back into WordPress and go, hey, this user is asking for Fran's top 5 movies. That's the variable that he's asking for. So let's give him that data back. Okay. So that's the major difference is this query has variables. The index page did not. So now this is very similar, but again, we have to account for the variables. So we have a response variable where we await the client. Then we have a property of query, and then same thing, get post. But again, accounting for the variable, which in this case, the parameter is the slug. That's what's going to be a variety. It's going to be a variable. It's going to change. Okay. And then down here, we traverse that with data post. And then we return the property of the single post this time, not posts, post. That's the major difference between the dynamic page and then the home page. And then the last thing I wanted to go over before I show you everything and then pass the realms over to Magic is that if you notice, we have a new function down here. This is get static paths. Now, within Next.js, in a dynamic route file, when you're going to make get static props, you have to pair up with get static paths because Next.js will generate a static version of your page when it starts serving the app. So what happens is because these paths are dynamic and they're multiple, you have to let Next.js know, hey, within this dynamic route, there's different paths, right? Excuse me, that we're going to have to account for too. Otherwise, it's not going to work. We need the paths and their props. So this is the function that pre-generates or pre-builds the static paths. Here's the caveat, and this is going to be solved in the future. Maybe Magic, you and I can do another webinar together when Jason Ball releases WP GraphQL Smart Cache. But here's the thing. Here's the issue right now. If you're getting into headless WordPress and using dynamic route files in Next.js. Sometimes within get static paths, you can make another query of grabbing all the paths and pre-building them, okay? Which is fine because obviously it's pre-built, Jamstack, snappier, faster. Caveat to that. when you have a large site, like maybe Android Authority, who's on WP Engine using headless, or if you like sports, I don't know, ESPN. Okay, those are big, large, huge sites with multiple pages and paths. Imagine every time you have a dynamic route file, you're going to tell Next.js, oh, build every single path. That's going to ping your WordPress server how many ever times that you have as far as like those pages are concerned. That's not good. You're going to time out your WordPress server, exhaust it, and it's kind of like you're DDoS attacking yourself, and it's going to time out the WordPress server, and then you're going to get a 504 and a JSON error. You don't want that. So, and again, this is only for large sites, but for best practice, you can essentially do two things right here. The first thing is, as you can see in this get static path function, I'm returning I crossed out the slash about path, but I'm returning an empty array, okay? And then I return just the paths and fallback blocking. This is telling Next.js, oh, Next.js, I want you to not pre-build these static paths, but at runtime, aka server-side render, that's when I want you to build the path. When the user is trying to access the link on the browser, server-side render that, build that at runtime, okay? And then after that, after subsequent requests, that path is already built, and then it's static. So the code here is fallback blocking to server-side render that. Now, if there's really important paths that you need to pre-render, like I said, you can just open up parentheses and then actually declare the relative path right here. And say I have an about page in here somewhere, it'll pre-render that actual path so that like there's certain paths that you can pre-render. So let's see how this works in action. Super excited. Okay, I didn't close the server, the dev server. So now in theory, when I click on this link, it should take me to a post detail page with my top 5 movies of all time. And there it is. It did it. Yeah, there you go. The dynamic route brought to me this path, which is the parameter of slug here. This is the slug of this detail page. And hopefully you like these movies. Maybe you don't. That's okay. And that's how you build a startup headless WordPress site, Magic. I mean, again, I pre-built all these files, and we have a step-by-step tutorial that one can do. But as you can tell, there's quite a bit of code involved and whatnot. But we're trying to lower the barrier of entry to make it that much easier. So.
Yeah, and what's important right now, this is, at least this part, the single pages are server-side rendered, because you set this static path to blocking, right?
Correct. That is correct. Yeah. So this is, the path is server-side rendered. And then every subsequent request from then on is cached. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the thing that is left, we should now show how to deploy it. Deploy it. So now it's my turn.
Okay.
I'm just doing some. Okay, let me just zoom in a bit because I know how. So
cool.
This is in general the repository. We already talked about this. There is just one thing about which Fran didn't mention because it wasn't related to the project itself. It's this netlify.toml file. So this is in short this configuration file to deploy on Netlify. The problem here is, it's the moment when we are using server-side rendering, we need a node server, because the cool part about using everything that is pre-built, we can just drop it anywhere because it's just HTML. Right now, we will have to use Node. That's why we will deploy it on Netlify, because Netlify has a feature like this. Also, we can use Vercel, some DigitalOcean if we configure it properly. Okay, so let's do it.
Yeah, let's do
So we're going to
this.
create a new project. Let me just do a little zoom. This is this body run project, so let it initialize. Okay, and what we have to do is, of course, create a new pipeline. Pipelines are, of course, the set of actions we will be repeating every time we will try to deploy our code. So let's call it deploy to Netlify, right? Because we will be, and we will do it manually every time when we press the run button. So let's add a pipeline. So our pipeline will do two things. First, we will try to build everything locally at body to see is everything all right with our code. Why? Because it's much easier to debug some build errors using body rather than using Netlify. So first we're going to use the node command, and here we are going just to run npm install, and it was npm run build, if I remember. What is important, if we would, or let's run it. Oh, I forgot to change, because it would be better to run on node 17, because you used this newer syntax at some point.
Okay.
So it will be better to do. And let me show what will happen, because it will crash. It will crash for some reason, and we will fix it together. Okay, so now it's installing everything we have in our package.json file. It will take a second, because the first time is always the longest. Okay, and it's starting to create everything. It's trying to collect the page data.
Cool.
And we have an error. Why? Because Fran used a very good practice of storing some of the data in the env file, but we shouldn't never store the env file in the Git repository. So we have to pass the variable responsible with the URL of the WordPress inside. We have something like variables, and they can be either pipeline wide or action wide. We will store it for the whole pipeline. So we need this variable called next public WordPress API URL, and it has to be this one. Okay, so let's see what will happen right now. So let's go back into the run. Let's run it again. Let's see what will happen.
Yeah, this is cool.
Right now. So again, this time it was faster because all the packages were already downloaded.
Yep.
And this time, collecting the page data, we see the generating static pages, 3 out of 3. Everything is done. So we were missing this variable. So right now we see that the whole build process is working. That's great. So we have it logged. If we would have a pre-built page, we would just move only this .next folder onto Netlify. But because we need to launch a node server, which everything is configured in this netlify.toml file, we will just do it a bit differently. So still, we will use the Netlify action here. And instead of the default Netlify deploy and selecting the directory, we will do something like this. And I already integrated with my account called Dreamy Euler. Okay. The problem is if we would try to deploy right now, we would hit the same problem we had action before, because Netlify doesn't have this variable set, this next public WordPress API URL, and it will be built on the server. That's why we have to use Netlify. CLI has this great command called Netlify env set. And we will set the next public WordPress API URL, and it will be automatically taken from our variable. So we don't have to correct it in both places. We will store it at once. And then we'll run Netlify deploy and with the build parameter. So there was this build action set in this Netlify toml file. So everything should work. Let's add this action. And the only thing left is to run it. Let's see what will happen. Okay, so we now have a few seconds until we'll get the result, and we'll see what will happen.
Nice.
So already the npm build is. We see that now we are setting this next public WordPress API URL to our URL that we wanted. And in the meantime, we are deploying. Okay, it was set right now in the context. The build is happening. We can see that the config file from the Netlify toml file will be used.
Oh, yeah, I see it.
Yeah, it's
okay. That's why.
Yes, and yeah, it's always taking a while. We can talk a bit about your. Oh, we have an error. I always hate when it happens. When it happens. Netlify npm run build config environment node version config. This is rather weird. Let's check. Unexpected tokens. This is weird. It should. You know what? I set the version of the node to the latest one. But
yeah, you did. I saw that.
I did it, but so you know what? We're gonna do a bit dirty fix right now, because it doesn't. Yeah, this is the thing about version changes and everything. So we're gonna just do a quick fix in the code.
Sure.
Yeah, because Fran is using always the latest stuff, and this is great. I mean, I need to find. Okay, now it's why it is jumping like this. Oh God, wait a second. Okay, I'm trying to. Okay, it was the fallback. No, this is the post response. It's okay here. Sorry, not this one. It was on the index.js and slug. Okay, I see the problem. So we're gonna fix it right now. Let's go to the index file. Let's click edit. I already see the problem here. Yeah, this is it. Because this is a newer syntax, and for some reason I see that Netlify did not set the node version. I won't go into details right now. Just let's retry the execution. It should go right now, and if not, we'll just rebuild it from the beginning. Then it should work. Yeah, because this is the thing that was either in some latest 16 version or in Node 17, from what I learned, because it took me a while trying to figure out. Yeah, so let's rebuild everything from scratch. It will be easier. Let's try it now.
Yeah, let's do it.
It should be all right now, and if not, we'll see.
You gotta love it. The joys,
yeah. I mean,
the joys
those are the joys of
live webinaring.
Oh yeah, sometimes
joys.
it happens, so some things are happening. Yeah, but
Yeah.
in general, we can see that the problem was related to this. Okay. Compiled. Yes.
Come on, baby.
Yes, it was it. It went through. It went through. It went through. It was this one. Yeah, I'm kind of surprised because I did a test before. Something with setting the node version on Netlify itself didn't work right now.
Okay. Is that what? Okay. That's what.
Okay, and then we have the website URL. Everything should be working, so we can copy the URL, paste it, and see if the website is working.
Come on.
Oh no, it's my old one.
Oh.
Huh. Yeah, because I'm using this. I'm using the same account for all the tests. Oh, please rebuild. What are you? Why are you behaving like this during the live webinar? This is really not nice of you.
Come on.
No. Oh, this is totally weird.
That's weird.
It's weird. It's deployed something totally different, and it's now it can.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder if it's
because
pulling from another repo.
It's showing me the previous version of the website.
That's weird.
Something is this is let's check this one. Yeah, something is. Let me close this one. Let's see what we have. Okay, this one will work. Yeah, so I already see the title. Headless WordPress starter.
Yay!
Yes, we have
it.
Yes, we have it. Cache. Of course, if everything, if something goes wrong, it's
the cache. Yeah, clear the cache.
It's the cache, exactly. So yeah, this is more or less how we can deploy everything. Of course, everything it's very important about keeping an eye on the versions of Node of tools like this. And here we can see that the routing is working. Also, because this part is dynamic, could you try doing one thing? Please change the title of this website, of this page. Let's do something.
Okay.
So we can see that without rebuilding, that this is dynamic. So we will press the control reload.
Oh, you mean
change the title?
You mean this actually is statically this dynamic page.
Mm-hmm.
Just the slug path is dynamic. The actual content is still
the page is static.
Okay. Yeah, the page itself is static, not the it's the path that's not in the route.
Okay. I understand now.
Yeah. So it
we would have to rebuild everything to
we would have to essentially drop in a revalidate ISR function. And that could that we could do that on another webinar. But
okay, so I think we got it. We really covered a lot of things today about building and deploying everything and dealing with some small bugs during the live webinar. This is always the best part of it. You never know what will happen. And we have some questions from the audience. So let's try to respond to all of them, especially that some of them are very interesting. First of all, Lax asked, when will be WP GraphQL added to core?
Ooh, that's a great that's a great question. I don't know, but I will tell you something, Lax, that I'm a big proponent for it. So is Jason Ball. It would be amazing when WordPress ships with GraphQL at its core. I don't know when. I hope it's soon, man. I hope it's soon. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
Okay, so yeah, we are. I remember that at some point Jason had this discussion with Leonardo Lozovitz, who is
He
also
did.
author of a similar plugin, and they were discussing should we or shouldn't we add GraphQL to the core. And I remember that at some point they even started thinking that yeah, GraphQL shouldn't be added to the core. It should be more of a plugin territory because of its nature. Because REST API is, let's say, always the same, and with GraphQL, it's more about a query language. So yeah,
Yes. Yeah.
it's not that easy. And Moale also asked a very interesting question: is how difficult would it be to use BuddyPress with GraphQL? It seems there isn't a lot of documentation about it, almost
That's a
none.
good.
I mean, if I remember, BuddyPress has the REST API. So this is good news because at least there is a REST API. I'm not also sure is there a GraphQL for BuddyPress, but voila, good news. Because I once play around with creating a GraphQL support for one plugin. It's not that difficult. Try and do it. You can try making a plugin for it. It's not that difficult, although then you will have to support it and get hundreds of tickets every day. So I'm not sure is it worth to start. But
Yeah.
I think that if there was a GraphQL support for BuddyPress, it would be kind of easy to use together
Yeah.
with static. Of course, we
I would
shouldn't then
think.
use pre-building. We would have to use server-side rendering in most cases, because if I remember, BuddyPress is for this social way to the social plugin to use with WordPress. So yeah,
Cool.
and I see here. Oh, we have this one from Luke Saunders. So would this be the preferred way if I am building a one-page website that will most likely stay static?
I mean, essentially, Luke, that's a good question. There's a lot of variables that would depend, but if you're saying, hey, if you're asking me, hey, Fran, would this be the preferred way if I'm building a static website and I want to do it headless WordPress way? Yes, you would essentially just statically pre-generate that page, because there would be no real reason to use the other rendering patterns if it mostly is just static HTML that you're showing on a page that doesn't change very much.
Yeah, just convert it to HTML
Yeah.
and forget about it.
Yeah, forget about it.
Yeah, this is the best thing about static HTML. It's static.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we have also this one. How can you create a clean editing experience while using component-based patterns? Do you retain any server-side rendering, or is it static site generation? Or is the static site generated? Oh.
So how can you create a clean editing experience, okay, while using component-based patterns? Do you mean like as far as a clean editing experience on the WordPress backend, and then retaining any SSR obviously on the front end? Is that?
I
Yeah,
probably think it's about something like this. So
yeah. So as far as from the editing experience is concerned with WordPress, that's one of the major kind of benefits, if you will, on when you go headless. There's so many CMSs out there. There's Contentful, there's Graph CMS, there's Supabase. Well, actually, that's a database, but you can turn it into a CMS.
there is StateMic, Drupal.
Well,
I mean, I'm working on a list of headless CMSs, so I'm like,
yeah,
on the topic right now. There's really a lot of them.
yeah, and that's the thing, right? Is that like as a WordPress editor, like you saw the post that Magic and I were pulling out of WordPress. By default, the editing experience is just that awesome in WordPress. It's easy. It's super easy. It comes with default types, post and pages, right? and then right away, a WordPress editor in a headless fashion workflow, they can have a front-end dev team, and this is how mostly WordPress, headless WordPress teams work, because I've seen it, actual customers do this. They'll have an actual editing team, to your point, and they just go about their business like using WordPress. They don't, but they now know that, hey, I need these front-end developers to say, hey, these are my post types in WordPress, whether they're going to create a custom post type or not. Mr. Editor, you now create the components on the front end, okay, in React, Vue, whatever you're going to use front end. And then you're going to be in charge of whether you're going to statically generate the page within those components on the page, or server-side render, or like I said, you could hybrid render with ISR on Next.js. So that's exactly the workflow. I hope that answers your question, because the editing experience stays clean. Like the WordPress content editor, their workflow kind of doesn't change. The only thing that really changes is like, oh crap, I need a JavaScript front-end developer to create those components to grab that data from, like we were just showing. Exactly. I was creating page components to grab the data out of WordPress. So yeah.
And the last question we have: when a non-technical user makes a change in WordPress, how can they trigger a Next.js rebuild?
Oh, that's actually a great question. And the answer to that is there's quite a few ways. Currently, what's really cool is on the Atlas platform at WP Engine, you could do it via a web hook. And what a web hook is essentially, it's just an endpoint that hooks into certain backends or platforms to trigger an action. So in this case, say a non-technical user, Magic, say I'm a content editor, and I'm like, I don't know code. Simply go into your WordPress admin. You're going to download a plugin. There's quite a few. I like WP webhooks. Download that. Go to your Atlas platform, or you can tell, it's easy, or you tell your developers if you don't want to mess with a webhook. You just press generate webhook. Netlify has them too. Vercel has them too. It's going to give you an endpoint.
Buddy has them.
It's going to generate an endpoint, a URL. You're going to embed that URL into your WordPress admin within that webhook plugin. And then you're going to tell that plugin, hey, every time a non-technical user publishes a post, creates one, deletes one, updates one, please trigger a build in the front end and Next.js so that it reflects the changes. So that's a major and main way most people do it. And then obviously, like I was telling Magic with ISR and everything, if a developer is using Next.js and the other frameworks do hybrid rendering, they can set a revalidate time period to invalidate the cache, so that when you change a data in WordPress, whether it's you make a change in the post or whatever, and you publish that, you as a non-technical user can rest assured that the front-end code is going to search for that change whatever time you sent it. So that's another way. And then you could also time it and use a cron job for changes. Yeah, so anyway, those are many ways.
So we can use one of our favorite phrases. It depends.
It depends. Yeah, it depends.
Or also using webhooks, we can also do one more thing. We can connect it automatically, that every time someone will press the save post, it will be automatically. So there are really lots and lots of ways that we can do it, and it's really up to the situation, because
true,
this is the most important. It always depends on the situation. So also, yeah, this was the last question we have. Also, with the start of this webinar, we launched a poll in the YouTube comments about are you using WordPress as a headless CMS? And I mean, this is one of those surveys that didn't tell us so much, because it's split it almost equally on only decoupled WordPress 1/3, both 1/3, and WordPress as front to back a little less, but they were quite near of each other. So still, everyone uses WordPress as they want because we have really so much options.
There's
right
options.
now. There's options. So really, selecting the best one isn't easy. It isn't easy. And so, Fran, I really wanted to thank you so much for showing us how to start. I think that next time, Astro, right? We'll dive more into Astro. I'm
Yeah,
sure
we actually that's a good idea because Fred Schott, I hope I pronounced your name right, Fred, the co-creator of Astro, is actually coming onto my podcast next week to talk about Astro, headless WordPress, and how Astro might overtake Next.js as the next framework. So tune in for that. But yeah, next time, because I'm going to be messing with Astro, so maybe we do something with Astro magic.
This would be amazing. And remember, everyone, if you want to be up to date with what is happening with our webinars, join our meetup group called Buddy CI/CD group. You'll be always informed about the new events that are happening. Also, if you like what we are doing, remember to press subscribe or follow us on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, whatever you like. And next week, we will have a really interesting topic. To be honest, this is one of those topics when I didn't even knew almost anything about it. So I will be learning together with Philip Tepper, because we will discuss why the lack of SRA kills your business. This SRA is a very interesting topic when it comes to DevOps. So if you are all in DevOps, please join us. It will be something really interesting. So, Fran, thank you. Thank you once again. It was really amazing doing this webinar with you. Also, I wanted to thank everyone in the audience for being with us. And what can I say? Have a great day, night, or whatever you have right now at the moment. So, bye, everyone.
Bye. Cheers.